Okay, hello world, um, from wherever you are right now. As you can see, we have different time zones already um, um, in this session, and you will see how we are going from the morning in America to the night in Asia in a lovely session about emerging futures. And I will go back to that in a bit. Um, this has been an intense week. I have been following some of the sessions online, mostly of the Fab Symposium. And I have to say that, going from the COVID response action to the community action to rebooting economies, going through emerging futures, there is a thread that you will see that gives some coherence on all of the topics that we have been talking this week in this amazing event and this special edition of the FabLab conference, this time getting into every corner of the world thanks to digital technologies. Um, the FAB event is historically being organized by the Center for Bits and Atoms and the Fab Foundation. Most of you know, this is an opportunity to gather the community physically together, the FabLab community physically together in one place of the world every year. This was supposed to be the 16th edition. It is still, but it's a special one. That's why it's called FABxLive. It's special because it's happening mostly thanks to bits. Although all of us, we are made of atoms, and we are interacting with our atoms, make them resonate, and make the atoms in our brains to create ideas and share it to the world. But it's also a great opportunity to reach to every corner of the world. No, we could only allocate a few people in a room, a few thousand people in a room every year when we were organizing the FabLab conference. Moving in different countries in the world. Right now, it's possible for you to sit in your bedroom, in your living room, in your lab with your colleagues as it's happening, and as everyone has been sharing in the online platform of the Fab community. So as I told you, today is a special day because we have a challenge in this session that is split in two. As you will see, we have 1 hour right now, and then we're going to have a half an hour stop for the Fab World session, and then we will continue with emerging futures around 9:30 a.m. Boston time and also PM time here in Indonesia, where I am now. Emerging Futures is a session that tries to look forward, not by just trying to predict the future or trying to create, kind of science fiction speculations about what kind of future or futures we will be able to see, especially in a year in which we have been hit by a very tiny virus, and that has shown us, like, maybe all that optimism about so many things needed to be revised, and probably needed a deeper reflection about what we are doing, why are we doing what we are doing, and where we want to go with what we are doing somehow. No. I have to say also that emerging futures is about the usage of the opportunities that the crisis creates. This has happened before. In the most dark times in our history, we have been able, as humanity, through collaboration and through joint forces, to really take a leap forward and to go over very, very big challenges that you can call some of them, 100 years ago, part of the world was a big war. It seemed that they were very dark times for some countries, and somehow we managed to get over it thanks to many efforts of many individuals, but especially thanks to collaboration. So in this session, in the Emerging Futures session, I want to welcome, in these two sessions that I split the Emerging Futures track, I want to welcome voices that have been talking about the potential risks of technology and somehow jump from that techno-optimism that somehow can lead us to unintended consequences, Also voices that talk about the respect of culture diversity and the preservation of identity and cultural identity and tradition through technology as well. And I want also to, in the second part of the session, to welcome new voices and young voices that have been growing within the FabLab network and that they are looking beyond the lab itself and what it can make to transform the world. So without any further extension of this introduction, I want to welcome the first speaker of this session of Emerging Futures, someone that I consider a friend and someone I can talk very frankly. And you can. It's very rare that you can find people that you can talk so frankly with, and that's Dr. Ron English, who is a professor in the School of Information at the University of Michigan. He received his bachelor's in cybernetics, his master's in systems engineering, and his PhD in history of consciousness, all from the University of California. Ron, I think that I will leave the network to discover your work. I won't tell them what you're going to talk about, but the stage is yours. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Tomas. All right, let me do my share screen here. And put that in presentation mode. And hopefully folks are now seeing my slideshow. Can you just nod your head? And okay, great. So I'm going to be talking about restorative technologies for a generative economy. And the way my talk goes proceeds from left to right on this screen. So you can see we start with an indigenous heritage algorithm. We move to a simulation of that heritage algorithm, and then we move to a kind of physical rendering of those ideas. And a good place to start might be with restorative justice. That was first introduced in Detroit in 1958 by a psychologist, Albert Eglash, happens to be my father, who was working with incarcerated citizens, returned citizens from prison, and they kept talking about the feeling that they needed to make amends. And he realized our justice system was based on retribution, on punishment, revenge, not restitution, bringing things back into balance. And so he introduced these three concepts. That first, there would be a recognition of the harm and the need for repair. And next, an encounter in which both parties would work together on the response. And then finally, a transformation, actual change in the world. My dad was a psychologist, but I'm very interested in how to apply that restorative justice concept to society as a whole, to environment, to industry, to the way we treat each other. And I think those three principles are good ways to think about it, even at that large scale. So first, recognize the harm done. And if I wanted to summarize that in some way, I would say it's about the extraction of value. It's extracting ecological value from nature, from pollution and overharvesting. It's extracting labor value from low-paid, unfulfilling jobs, forcing folks onto these assembly lines. And it's extracting social value, colonizing either our physical landscape or our online social networks in some way, and enacting different sorts of violence as it colonizes those areas. The origins of this are in colonialism. And if you look at how colonialism set up extraction, of course, it was all about taking over lands. But even after some of those lands were liberated, our minds still tend to be colonized by this pyramid, this hierarchy that colonialists set up. The idea was that Europeans, Western civilization, had the only true science and technology. And as you go down to these tribal societies, to hunter-gatherer societies, you would get less and less until you're with folks that just have no science and technology to speak of. From my point of view, that's a myth. That's something that's been placed upon us to view the world through the lens of the colonizers, not through the colonized. If we look for indigenous STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, we don't necessarily see it. Our eyes are not attuned to looking for those features. And that was certainly the case for me. So when I first began to look at fractal geometry, at patterns that repeat themselves at many different scales, I saw it in these African villages, but I just assumed it was like termite mounds are fractals or coral reefs are fractals, that there's a kind of bottom-up self-organization, and so you would naturally produce a kind of self-organized geometry, self-similar fractal patterns. And as I started to collect examples from all over the world of indigenous architecture, I realized all the examples of fractals were in those African villages. And that's when it struck me that this was not simply a universal property of indigenous cultures, that there's some kind of knowledge at play here that's specific to these African cultures. So I got a Fulbright to just spend a year traveling around Africa, interviewing folks, and wrote this book, African Fractals, about that experiments documenting these heritage algorithms. And in each case, I would interview somebody and say, well, I see that your blanket here has diamonds inside of diamonds inside of diamonds. What's up? I see that your little village here has a big circle and a small circle and a smaller circle. So each time I got not only the geometry, the computational aspects, but there would also be a kind of backstory that was about the spiritual meanings behind this. Last summer, we got to film a documentary with Samuel Jackson that's going to be playing soon, where we looked at some of these fractals in Ethiopia. So this is me standing in front of a 1,000-year-old stone church, and you can see it's got crosses inside of crosses inside of crosses. So even when new cultures would come into contact in Africa, there'd be a kind of syncretism or blending. But the oldest forms would show something like this snake biting its own tail, that recursive loop of the heritage algorithm. And if you look at how materials are fabricated in these societies, you can see why that loop is so very important. So here's my old colleague, Gabriel Boache, passed away, unfortunately, just last year, getting bark from a tree, the body tree, and it gets boiled down in these big vats, and then the bark is strained. The leftover bark, where all the ink has been taken out, is then composted and thrown back into the forest. And these sacred forest spots are hot spots of biodiversity. And so they enrich these other areas where they're harvesting the trees. So you can see the whole thing works as a circular system. And the ink that they're extracting from the bark is used to stamp these cloths. So you get this beautiful symbol system that promulgates the cultural ideas that keep things egalitarian, that keeps things circulating. So this gives us a bit of an understanding of why it is we have such a hard time recognizing indigenous STEM. Western STEM was created for the purpose of value extraction. You have a giant plantation and monocropping to optimize that one, cash crop that you want. You've got a giant factory that's extracting as much value out of workers as you can. So of course you produce a science and technology that's quite different from the societies whose goal is to prevent value extraction, to nurture circulation, to nurture unalienated value flow. That's why we have such a difficult time seeing it when it's right in front of our noses. So in Indonesia, in northern India, you see these beautiful bridges that are made of living trees. They'll take a couple of roots from the ficus tree and stretch them across the river, and then over time you add more and more roots to it, and finally you get a structure that's strong enough to cross on foot, and over time, over several generations, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So if Western engineers came up with a bridge that was self-healing, self-repairing, that strengthened over time instead of decaying like our current infrastructure does, it'd be New York Times headlines, right? Oh my gosh, brilliant nanotechnology. But of course, when indigenous folks do it, it's dismissed as, oh yeah, they're using nature, very crude. So we really have to look at these things with very different, through very different lens if we want to catch on to the sophistication and the complexity of what's happening in these indigenous societies. Now, I mentioned Detroit 1958 restorative justice principles started with that recognition of the damage, and certainly that pyramid form is part of that damage, that myth that state societies are the only ones that have science and technology. We could invert that. So we could say, okay, so state societies will give you that. You are the most extractive, congratulations. But we could invert the pyramid and say the indigenous societies are in fact the most generative STEM, right? And part two of that restorative justice process was this encounter in which both parties would come together and work as a response. So that's the question I'm raising here, is how do we bring together those digital technologies and the brilliance of those generative cycles? So we've created this website, Culturally Situated Design Tools, CSDT.org. And it's free for use, open source. Anybody can go on there and just play around with the simulations, look at the cultural background of these different societies and how they created these heritage algorithms. And we've had really great responses from the National Science Foundation supporting this for K through 12 education. The kids are very creative. You can give them a heritage algorithm and they'll immediately start just getting creative with it and saying, yeah, I know, grandma made that cool looking Navajo rug, but I'm living in 2020. I want to make my own version of what constitutes Navajo weaving right here on the screen. And so the kids start playing around with math and computing ideas as if they're, paintbrushes and crayons. Just wonderful creativity that we see in those encounters. The next step, we physically render those designs. So whatever it was on the screen, you can use laser cutters or 3D printers, the kinds of digital fabrication that the folks at the Bits and Atoms Center at MIT have been helping folks become aware of. And that enabled us to get into the adult economy. So once we started producing these mannequin heads, we could then go to braiding shops and say, hey, is there some way that we could feature these or you could make use of these? And there's been a really fantastic response from adult entrepreneurs about working with the younger generation on these simulations. I find that they're very different depending on where they're located. So working with African-American kids, they really embrace the 3D printers and the mannequin heads. Working with Native American students, not so much. They really wanted to have that hands-on tactile feeling of fabrication. And so what we did is we had them design virtual designs on the screen, and then we'd just use a paper printout or we'd use a laser cutter to mark the little spots where you'd insert those fiber arcs. And so it was sort of a cyborg, half traditional, half digital. In the case of West Africa, we found folks doing the stamped cloth tradition using these latex sponges that would wear out, but they wouldn't decompose. And so they asked us if we had a more sustainable solution for that. So we used mushroom foam from the Ecovative company back in New York. We 3D printed the symbols, the Adinkra symbols that they were using in the negative, so it became a little mold, and then you could put the mushroom foam and it would grow into that mold, and folks could stamp it with a biodegradable stamp. We've also had a lot of luck recently with the laser cutters that we had brought to West Africa. We have another group in Detroit, Michigan, that's doing the same sort of thing. They had actually imported some of the African cloth. There was an African-American group that was doing kind of a roots fabric thing. And so both groups in West Africa and Detroit are using laser cutters to create masks for the COVID pandemic, as well as these beautiful Adinkra designs that are now sewn onto shirts and other clothing articles. And then another group in Detroit that we were having a lot of fun with was the African Bead Museum that Alame Doubles runs in Detroit. He was running little workshops for kids where he'd just buy a bunch of plastic beads. And I asked him once, well, could we grow the beads? Could we reunite making and growing the way it was traditionally done in Africa? And he was pretty excited about that. So we managed to get a small grant to build what we're going to call the African Futurist Greenhouse. This is Kisa Johnson Muhammad growing a plant called Job's Tears. And that's used in a beading tradition in Southern Africa. The Zulu have a beading tradition where they take these little pericarps that already have a hole because the stalk goes right through those. So once you harvest them, you don't have to drill anything. Nature's already provided the little hole down the middle. And so we're growing that along with food plants. I have another student that's using artificial intelligence to look at both the case of the artisanal fabrics as well as these growing systems to see if there's some way that we can have some intelligence built into this with sensors and so on. So to summarize, if we think about those indigenous traditions, they're quite applicable. Those cycles of unalienated value can be applied in the case of ecological value when we do organic gardening and we compost, in the case of labor value when we have worker-owned production, and in the case of social networks when we replace platform capitalism with platform cooperativism, when we have open source in code or speech or sexuality or spirituality or whatever the expression is that people want to be able to circulate in that authentic form. The problem is we live in a society that still has, the remnants of colonialism and then new forms of neocolonialism. So you need some sort of leverage. And of course, that can be done in the political sphere. But I would like to think that we can do that in the technological sphere as well. And so I think of this third phase of restorative justice, the transformation phase, as using the kinds of technologies that the Center for Bits and Atoms has been promoting as a kind of prosthetic. We have a wounded society. We need a kind of restorative technology to bring those cycles back to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron. As I said before, I think that it's so refreshing to hear so frankly, and so straightforward your readings about the issues or the potential issues that we might have with technology. Before jumping to and that opens up a lot of those questions. But before jumping into the conversation with or the presentation of Valencia, I wanted to share with you just quickly because it's a very hot topic. What about cultural appropriation? We can. It seems like it's just like in the borderline between using technology to preserve, to maintain, to transmit that cultural values, that diversity that you can find from traditions. But then where is the limit when it becomes cultural appropriation? With this really, really hot topic. This is from Cindy Kotala, by the way.
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I should mention our process. We're not just grabbing an artifact off the screen and saying, let's simulate this. We start working with the community, and that might be elders in the case of a Native American community. It might be artists in the case of the inner city. It might be practitioners of some craft in the case of Africa. And we ask permission. We say, look, here's what we're going for. We'd like to find those sophisticated mathematics that colonists said didn't exist. And we'd like to turn those into tools that your youth can use. And we'll show them examples of what we've done before. And the response has been amazing. I've seen, Navajo grandmothers with just tears that their kids were no longer going to be shunning this weaving tradition because now it was in their favorite medium, which was the video screen, right? So there's been a terrific response from the authentic owners, so to speak, of these traditions. And then with youth, when I started out, I was thinking of these things in the terms that I learned growing up in the 60s, that there was this kind of cultural purity, right? But when we work with the youth, they're incredibly creative with bringing together different cultural elements. And so the background section for each of those tools I showed you, the CSDTs, if you go to that website, the first thing you'll see is a description of where these cultures are getting those practices from. That's incredibly important. And in the case of Appalachian areas, for example, we're talking about the traditions of white people, but it's a white population that's been extremely oppressed. I mean, these coal camps have intergenerational poverty going back many, many years. And so watching Native American kids and African American kids and white kids all encounter that material together and discuss it collectively, you know, is really eye-opening. And then even more so when they start producing creations that have that hybridity. So we had an African-American student whose parents were from Jamaica, and he simulated the Jamaican flag, but he wanted to use our simulation of the Native American bead loom. And, you know, we said, yeah, go for it, a Jamaican flag in beadwork. One of the Navajo students spotted that. And so she decided that she was going to make a Navajo rug based on the bead loom that was based on the Jamaican flag. So the cultural blending, you know, it really turns on its head, I think, the kinds of assumptions that the older generation has about these silos of ethnic purity.
Yeah, thank you. I think that definitely hybridization is something that, you know, it's unavoidable. And you know, even now, like when we have like you know, these efforts to polarize societies and go back to identity, and we're really forgetting that we are more connected than ever, and probably, you know, the fact that the futures that we want to create, they need to include that diversity. And it doesn't mean like a war of one over the other in the colonial terms, right? It's more or less opening a dialogue.
Yeah, so right now, all around the world, we're seeing statues being torn down. People are saying, you know, why do we have to have this big statue honoring somebody who's just a virulent racist, right? And we forget about the flip side of that there are these unrecognized heroes. So for example, we all do a Boolean search when we go onto Google. We use Boolean algebra on our computers. George Boole, the guy who invented all that, was white, grew up very poor, and never forgot his roots. So he was quite an advocate for social justice. And again, if you look at the history of mathematics and computing, you can find those folks. They're rarely talked about in those terms. I mean, I got an engineering degree, right? I had to do my own digging. I never found out that Norbert Weiner and you know, these other folks that we think of as the founders of cybernetics or different forms of engineering actually had a vision for social justice as well.
Definitely. I think we want to build on that, and probably I will now go to Helen. I will go back to continue this conversation, bringing, I think, never said to correctly, the spice of the East. You know, modern, they say modern capitalism is built on the foundation of the East in this company. So I'm really happy to be, you know, introducing Ellen. You will see her name is Valencia, but it's also Ellen. Ellen is now in Jakarta. She is the co-founder and managing director of Kekini, a co-working space established as a hub for cultural creative communities working to create common solutions for social challenges. She's also currently the Secretary General of the Co-working Indonesia Association. Ellen, again, thank you very much for joining. I think that, you know, going from the West to the East never was so meaningful. I really want to give you the stage, and let me know when you want me to share the screen.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Thomas and FabLab, for inviting me to be a part of this. It's like very inspiring event, and we feel humbled that the little things that we do actually resonate with the event and the other things that people do around the world. So let me start with the presentation. So we run a small co-working space in Jakarta. It's an independent co-working space, and like Thomas said, we are focusing on supporting the social and creative movement in Indonesia. So there are two things. So when the pandemic reached Indonesia, we heard about it already in February, but there has been not much talk about it. So it was just like something that is happening around the neighboring countries. And then as soon as it turned to March, then the government started to do something. So, and that's when the sort of like we call it the social limitation order is being implemented. So maybe some of you would use the term lockdown. So at that time, the offices are told to be shut down, and we also, of course, shut down. So we have been closing our space for 4 months now. And during the first months, there has been like a discussion like how are we, what are we going to do? Because like the physical space is no longer available to be accessed. So we move online. Moving offline to online, it's another challenges because our space is not meant for that. So there has been a lot of learnings on the technology as well. Zoom become our daily casual language now, but in the beginning it was like, what is Zoom? What is all this like online management system that we need to get used to? So moving on, we started to discuss with our partners, so the communities that have been part of the Kini all this time, and we agreed to let's just take the time to reflect and then start what we call the community talk. So what is community talk? If we can go to the next slide, we started from this language, bias, and future. So when the pandemic hits us, we suddenly also were presented by a lot of big words. The words that we're not familiar before, it's in English, and it's medical terms, and then it's absorbed in Indonesian. Sometimes it's translated, most of the time it's not. Because of the speed of the information that the government needs to spread. So there has been a lot of bias that we see. People who speak English, of course, especially in the big cities, it's easy for them to catch it up. Also, also because they can access the internet and see what's going on in the other parts of the world. But the majority of Indonesians, so if you are aware that we are a country of 17,000 islands and we have like more than 700 languages. So Indonesian itself is already a challenge because it is a lingua franca, but a lot of our society are still using also traditional language. So, and suddenly, we have all this information, which is a mix of modern Indonesian and then English. So it becomes a bias. So a lot of the information about the pandemic itself, it stays mainly on the big cities, and the language that they use also, it's academic language a lot of times. So when we reflect about this, we thought about, maybe this is also the time to talk about the important things that we need to be talked about. It has been talked about sporadically in different platforms, but it has never been brought up in one platform where people can meet and then can share their thoughts. So I'll share more about the future. Maybe if you can go to the next slide. So these are what we decide. So how can we be part of the movement, but at the same time also trying to break the barrier of the language, of the biases, and what we think is important for the future. When we talk about the community, what we realize first is the community comprised of different layers. And this is what is often forgotten, because when people talk about like public or people or society or community, it seems like there is only one layer, and most of the time the language used are for those who are quite well educated. So we became very aware of that. So when we design the program, the community talks, or we call it obrolan warga actually for us, it has a more, how do you call it, casual meaning. It's like people on the street, talking, people on the coffee shop talking. So it's that kind of image that we would like to give by naming it obrolan warga. So these are the things that we, I'm sorry that this is in Indonesian, because of course, being in Indonesia, everything is in Indonesian. So we have two major programs. So one is, if you can go to the next slide, is the Citizen Talk. So it's discussing topics related to current and future situation. and connecting different stakeholders in one forum. This is very important because a lot of times, like people are actually talking about the same thing. So like people talking about technology here, you don't see often like the artists who are working with technology talking in the same forum with the technologists, or even with the or the government who are creating policies about technology. So this is what we're trying to bridge. We can go to, if we can move, I can to the other presentation. I can share with you the topics that we are discussing and why we feel this is important, especially for the Indonesian context. So we shared, there are 12 citizen talks, so 12 topics. It's all discussing the things that we feel relevant during the pandemic, but also afterwards. So if you can go to the slide number 3. Yeah, so as you can see, like these people, these are our resource person. You don't normally, a lot of these people are not, they don't normally meet in the same platform. So we are humbled that they trust us. I mean, they are like prominent thinkers also in our country, in Indonesia. We are very grateful that they would like to share things with us. So we talk about, like if you can go to the next slide. This is the topics, and then the next. So we talk about the state, market, and the citizens. We talk about learning from other countries, because at that time, the government are still focusing on other things instead of like really quick respond to the pandemic on how to distribute the information so that people can be aware with that as well. We talk about information, the openness of information and mobility management, especially regarding COVID. And we realized that when it comes from the government, it's really, they have like this tension of whatever information that we give, we need to prevent people from being panicked. But at the same time, we have a citizen movement who, so we have 2 Twitter accounts that is very prominent right now from the citizen side, that act as a transparency of information about COVID. The idea is when people learn more about COVID, they will know what to do. The 4th one is the universal basic income. So this is an idea that we also talk about, like with our friends from the academic side, also from all the way to the people who are in the labor movement. Next. We also talk about internet as public good. This is important, especially now during the pandemic. It opens up everything because now the schools are closing, and you can imagine a lot of places in Indonesia, like in the mountains or in like remote islands, not even in remote islands, even in the island of Java, which is the main island. Some cities we still have like very bad internet connection or no internet connection at all. So it becomes a problem. People start talking about it, like how could you create an online school when the access to internet is still very limited. So, but the discussion about this actually brought up also some innovations that the citizens are creating to be able to access internet, not only because it's expensive, but also it's unreachable because like sometimes the technologies don't reach the remote areas. We talk also about food security because during the lockdown, there has been a moment where people are afraid because the food could not be distributed, especially people in the city where the food coming from other parts of outside of the city. So there has been a discussion about that. So we feel that it's also important to talk about food sovereignty. And then the other topics that we are discussing are, if you go to the next slide. Yes. The relation and inclusivity in community life and health as public good. So we also, like if you can go to the next slide, then I can just, thank you, Thomas. We also talk about the things that are happening in the middle of the society outside, pandemic, or as a response to the pandemic itself. So we see with the inclusivity topic, we learn about like how a lot of our friends who are disabled, who have a different abilities, cannot access the information because there is no information in Braille. there is no information given for people who are deaf, and there is lack of information also people with different abilities, with different physical abilities. So we found out that like there is one organization who actually create visuals to help people who have different abilities to be informed about what is happening. The solidarity across religion is one that touches us quite heavily, because we talk about like how different religious groups trying to respond to the pandemic, to be part of the community movement, but going beyond their congregations. This is important for us. If for you guys who follow the politics in Indonesia, religion is actually part of the politics. It's been used as a political issue in especially close during elections in different levels all the way to the national level. So it's very important for us to show that there are groups of people who are actually working on responding to the pandemic, but also going across the religion itself. So we have people from the Konghucu who just got the acknowledgement during our fourth presidency, which was Gus Dur, and then all the way to the pastor who serves in Merauke, which is like the eastern part of Indonesia, who is now talking about ecological how do you call it? Yeah, it's inside the Laudato, the ecological redemption. So he used the ecological redemption to actually approach the people to say that, like, look, this is what the pandemic shows us. So then we need to respect the nature, respect the life itself. And this is the last one. Of course, we also talk about the science and technology reflection. Whether, when we talk about technology, what do we mean by technology? Is it like only the current technology? Because now, again, if you follow Indonesia, digital technology becomes a very hip thing. There is a lot of, we have a lot of new startups. We have several unicorns in Indonesia. So sometimes people forgot that actually there are different kinds of technology. So what we have here in the technology part, we have somebody who is a geologist who talk about how they work with local stories. So with the stories that is passing down from generation to generation about what happened, but from there they can actually get like data on the movement of the earth. So then because we are living in the ring of fire, so there's like a lot of how do you call it? Yeah, so it's like slides. There's a lot of slides in between. So they're using this approach, talking to the elderly, the stories about what happened in their surroundings. So sometimes the stories becomes a myth. Sometimes they experience it themselves. But then when they come there, they try to explain it that it's actually scientifically, this is what it means. That also explains with a lot of the landslides, like major landslides that are happening in Indonesia. We also have what is quite interesting, stories from the village. So we have a village that has been there for 700 years. It's called Kasapuhan Cipta Gelar. So they're still working with the same culture, with the same, how do you call it? Yeah, with the same cultural way on cultivating their land, on relating with one another. But at the same time, they also embrace technology. So they create their own television. They create, they use drone for to monitor their land, and they're also using. They build like an internet tower, like literally build it themselves. So it's outside of the private sector, and then they share with us how they trying to align their cultural norms and their traditions with the development of technology. So this is very important for us because we wanted to show that what happened here, we have a gap between like the new technology and the old one, and sometimes we just jump. So when we jump, we don't have enough understanding of what the new technology is and how actually like the basics and the philosophy of the technology and how it harms us. So we don't have the fully understanding. So we become just users. So mainly, a lot of times in Indonesia, we see that we just become users instead of the creator and the inventors. So this, we talk a lot about also about this jump between the low technology to the high technology. So we are very glad with this. If you go to the next slide, and then the next after that. So what we do now is we're trying to document everything. We can go to the next slide again. So we have basically we will have 10 documentations and 10 archive of all this thinking from different people from different parts of Indonesia, which is in itself is already a treasure for us at least, yeah, because it's not easy to have these people online and coming together on the same platform. And we're hoping now after that we will publish it sometime in August. And after the publication, we are going to invite people to respond to it. So the idea is actually like how we can roll these ideas further. So because a lot of times when we have a discussion, it just stays there. It stays in YouTube, it stays on Facebook. But then we wanted to keep it rolling. So we have the writings of the ideas, the compilations, and then after that we wanted to keep it rolling. So we wanted to ask like artists to respond to it, people who are working probably in the technology maker to respond to it, people who are working, I don't know, in finance probably to respond to it, or even lecturer, or even like NGOs who want to create program based on the discussions that we have. To close this, I would like to go back to the video, Thomas, if you may. So one of the other things that we did as a response to the pandemic and being part of the movement is we did what we call hack from home. So it's retas dari rumah in Indonesian. This is like, I think the first one, and I think the only one, hackathon that is concentrated on hardware. So if we can just play the video, then I can explain it to you afterwards. I hope the sound is. So di rumah aja means just staying at home. Gabung means join us. It's an open call. So it's hack from home. It's called retas dari rumah. We did it last May. And then, so this is the idea is to extend green zone and also to collect innovation from home. So we have 4. So we have the household perimeter, the medical perimeter, the community and environment perimeter, the cultural hack, and the free challenge. The one that I wanted to talk to you about is the community and the cultural hack. We see, because again, there is not an equal distribution of information. What we see is people are trying to interpret themselves, about the situation. There is fear. They know that the virus is spreading, and then they know that people who caught it might spread it, like if you meet face to face. So what happened was, after the government shuts down the businesses in Jakarta, a lot of people who are working in the informal economy, they started to go home because they cannot stay in Jakarta. They don't have any income. They have like a daily income. So they started to go home. So when they go home, they basically spreading the virus, because some of them are already, have the virus within them. So then the villages, a lot of these people are coming from like small villages in Java, the closest one, but also in other parts of Indonesia. So the villagers started to create their own security system. So one of the security system is including, like, this is what we call the community innovation, is including like they lock down their own village. So then you have like a bamboo thing, like a bamboo fence. So then people have to report. But then there are other innovations that is quite amusing in a way, because like like I said, religion and myth are still very strong in Indonesia. So we have cases where somebody come back to their hometown and they don't want to self-isolate. So what happened was they still go up. So the head of the village locked them inside of a haunted house. So a house that is known as haunted. So they locked them down as a to create a deterrent effect. On another part of the village, on another area, what they do is like they dress people as a pocong. Pocong is like so in the Muslim, if you are a Muslim, when you are buried, then you will be covered. And we have like these stories, like some of the bodies just come up, so then all covered, and it's called pocong. So people dressing up as pocong, and then they put it like in the middle of the night, so then to prevent people from mobilizing, from one place to another. So we found like all these stories all over, this innovation as a response to the pandemic, but at the same time, it's quite saddening because that means like the lack of information because of whatever reason is really showing. It's really clear, and then like so we are now trying to encourage like together how can we spread better information. So we're working together also with what we call the Kawal COVID, the one that I told you. Kawal COVID is like one of the citizen actions to spread information about COVID through Twitter. And the other thing is, we're trying to have the second cultural hack, because we believe that culturally we have a lot of ways that we can, dig a lot of cultural thoughts that is embedded that we can dig to face this crisis, because the pandemic is not the first one that we face in Indonesia. We have stories from people who are still living. When they were a kid, they have stories, from their grandfather, when they're facing the Spanish flu, or they're facing another outbreak. So we do have those stories, and we hope to, collect them and then to create sort of like the way to think about on how to face the pandemic according to our context. So not
Thank
just
you.
absorbing words from outside. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ellen. I think it has been so complementary from the, the group, not only the theoretical work and the groundwork that Ron has put on top of the table, and all the the community interventions, I would say, in different with different perspectives, not from the African perspective, Latin American perspectives, even claiming that some let's say the Indonesian traditions. Now we go deeper into one approach to respond something like a pandemic. It doesn't really is about 3D printing masks in some cases, but it's important to that to have a cultural placing, a cultural intervention. I would call it like a community or a cultural situated intervention. What would you think about that, Ron? In this case, this kind of a merger in which it's not only technology representing culture, but also the broader context of culture in which technology has to situate itself, right?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a double-edged sword there. So often I'll do the little presentation to the National Science Foundation or somebody, and they'll say, "Oh, good. So you're tricking these folks into learning more STEM, right? They think that the kids are rats and the culture is cheese, and they're going to send the little rats through the STEM pipeline, or the culture is sugar coating, right? The bad tasting medicine that they need to learn is now being sugar coated with culture." So there's a downside to it, which is this sort of patronizing attitude that you sometimes hear. So the question is how to do it authentically, right? How to have that culturally situated form emerge from the grassroots up. And I think, I love that example, the haunted house. Who cares whether that's an ancient tradition or a new one they got from Halloween, right? The important thing is it's something authentically that comes from the grassroots.
Thank you. There is something else that I've been thinking about, which is the perspective from a, usually I think like the co-working spaces has been something that became almost like something very standard, no? Like you talk about co-working and it happens everywhere around the world. And it's identified with people sitting in a desktop, in a desk, and then playing with their computers. While I believe also like Fab Labs that are spread around the world is people playing with their with their machines in a way. Um, um, I see that in Kekini, what you're trying to do is actually go outside, you know, and not only stay in what they co-working as a space. And also, I think that there is a reference to that, which is how we somehow make that whatever experimentation happens in the lab, it goes outside and it goes into context. What do you think that, Ellen? What are your learning lessons of interacting with communities, and not only around your community in your co-working, but also connecting with with some of the 17,000 islands of Indonesia and trying to bring there some of the community action?
I guess when we talk about space for us,
you have 2 minutes. Sorry to say that you have 2 minutes because yeah.
So when we talk about space for us, it means not just physical space, but also space as a concept. So with that, we move beyond our physical space. So then the working space, it just becomes part of the facility. But with us, because our background, a lot of us are working from the social movement. So we have one co-founder who have been working, who actually the co-founder of the National Commissions for Violence Against Women. And one is working on the ecology sector. So then it becomes a natural for us on like, because we've been in the movement before. So we thought like when we have this up, what do we want to do? So what we think that is lacking is actually to connect the dots. So people from different perspectives, people from different areas to just come, together. So nobody is actually doing this, and also bringing in outside of the development sector. Because before, like if you work in the development sector, you will meet the same people. But then when we talk to public, it's like a different crowd. So that's what we want to do. We want to say that like, look, this is important, but of course, again, we need to use the correct language for that because like it's a different world. So that's, okay. Yeah, it becomes something that we realize from the very beginning. So the co-working space, it's a concept, but for us, we want to bring the concept further.
Okay. So finally, what the future looks like to you, Ron? If it's one future or many futures, or
well, I really like the way that Ellen has laid out this very practical approach that ties in very well-rooted institutions. A lot of the time, I'm struggling with the fact that we're working with these very small-scale entrepreneurs and artisans or folks out in a rural village somewhere. And so I think the future needs to happen at the intersection between those two efforts, right? Between what's happening at the small scale and then these very formal large-scale institutions.
Ellen, 30 seconds.
Yeah, the future is just really learning from each other because a lot of times it's already there. Like in our case, we do have a lot of knowledge in our traditions and our culture that actually could prepare us to face the future. But of course, we need to adjust it. But yeah, it's just it's just like learning from each other over and over again, like I did today with all of you here.
Thank you so much. Well, I have to wrap up. It has been lovely to have you both. And I'm really fascinated in the way that this conversation kind of comes together from some assumptions to realities, from community situated technologies to community situated or cultural situated interventions. I believe also that if you were expecting to talk about emerging futures and find some kind of a fancy Blade Runner kind of rendering of some laser flying cars and super fast computers, and this definitely was not the intention of this session. It seems like the emerging futures might be more visually boring, but it's more meaningful in meaning. Meaningful in depth, right? It seems like emerging futures is about creating inclusive conversations. It's about hybridization, and it's about looking closer to what is around us, and not that much abstracting ideas of the futures, but actually being able to enable others to create the futures we want and put our energy and make them possible. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ron and Ellen, again. This has been, again, lovely. And I hand over to the amazing FABxLive team to go with the next part of the sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was very inspiring, and we will have the second round of Emergent Futures panel in half an hour. And in between, we have created a collection of lab projects and welcome new lab videos that we invite you to see now. So welcome to Fab World.
I would like to say a few words about Make a Woman project, which I took part in 2016. It was the first edition. So the main aim of the project was to prevent the social and technological exclusion of women through informal education in new technologies and craft. So as you can see on the image here, it included introduction to 3D modeling and 3D printing, woodwork, basics of electronics, laser cutting, working with CNC machine, designing simple websites, sewing, business advice, and product photography. So basically the target group were girls who were just starting their careers and those who were returning into the market after maternity or parental leave. So I was definitely in the first group. I was just graduating as an architect, and I was always really curious about technology. So taking part in this amazing program sounded like great experience to extend my interests. And that was the initial motivation for me to join. The idea was to actually prepare the product, like a little innovative product, which would allow us to train the skills we just gained during these theme blocks during Make a Woman program. So my project was this LED hula hoop. I'm passionate about modern circus. I'm hula hoop lover, so it was something really close to my heart. It included little electronic elements linked with Arduino, which I coded, and linked with a LED stripe, which I put in hula hoop. And I had to, of course, model and test it in the softwares and 3D print certain elements. So it linked so many it linked so many elements which we learned during the whole process. As you can see here, the process of building it and testing was really inspiring, and I think the thing which was the most important from the whole program was this realization that you can learn whatever you want if you put certain amount of focus and attention and your heart in it, and it's not so hard. I feel like I gained so much knowledge over this couple of months like I didn't for a previous 15 years of my education. So with this experience, with this motivation to learn more about tech side, I went further. I went for this training organized by Female in Tech called Geek Carrot Girls, and I went through course focusing on designing for technologies, and I shifted my career just after a couple of months. So basically, my first experience was working in this innovation lab where I, apart from designing for technologies, I as well helped to furnish the office with the knowledge I gained during Maker Woman. So I really think this program changed my life and showed me you can really shift your career and decide about what you would like to do very easily. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing great and keeping safe. My name is Samuel, and I'm with F6S Network Limited, F6S for short, which is the largest startup SME community globally with over 1.5 million startups, SMEs, and 2 million entrepreneurs. And I'm really happy to be here today at FABxLive in this Fab World session representing iProduce, a European-funded Horizon 2020 project. So it's important to say that one of the most valuable advances over the course of the last few decades has been the opportunity for everyday citizens just like you and me to feel increasingly empowered to actively participate, contribute, and even decide in different areas and contexts. And despite this opportunity not yet being very visible, it is making its presence felt in the manufacturing industry. And iProduce specifically aims to play a role in this context. So what are we planning to do and already doing in iProduce? Well, the project has a number of key pillars, all being closely connected to the development of a social manufacturing framework, which aims to support open innovation and co-creation activities with the participation of different stakeholders in the design, the engineering, and production of consumer goods, so something that is of interest to all of us. These stakeholders are manufacturing enterprises, FabLab and maker communities and spaces, as well as consumers. And we're involving them through the promotion of co-creation missions that are driven specifically by consumer needs. Also, the engagement expands into micro-manufacturing and other local spaces organized as collaborative manufacturing demonstration facilities, or CMDFs, and through which the social manufacturing framework will be explored and will lead to new, unique, innovative activities. So what are our objectives? What are our big targets? Well, firstly, to connect. We're focused on bringing closer manufacturers, makers, and the consumers at the local level. Secondly, to engage. We want to engage these stakeholders in different co-creation challenges, namely to manufacture new consumer products and outline new production ecosystems. And thirdly, to combine. We're looking to combine existing and new practices, methods, and tools to be used by makers and manufacturers. It's important to highlight that many of the different project activities will be trialed in the 6 collaborative manufacturing demonstration facilities that have already been set up in the project, namely in France, Spain, Italy, Denmark, Germany, and Greece. And within the context of iProduce, they'll all be focusing on different types of manufacturing activities. There's a lot to be said about iProduce and the methodology we're going to apply, the technology and tools that we'll be delivering, and the innovation and impact we're aiming to deliver to everyone. For example, over the course of the upcoming months, we'll be working on platforms and organizing a series of events and competitions where your involvement as a FabLab, a makerspace, a consumer is more than welcome. But I would suggest that you get in touch with us and, of course, visit our website and social media where you can find all the information that you need about these activities. To wrap up, let me mention that iProduce is being implemented by a consortium of 20 partners, coordinated by IDMA from Spain. It includes Fab Labs, makerspaces, universities, SMEs, and other organizations from 9 European countries. So to close off, many thanks again to FABxLive for the opportunity, and to those of you who have tuned in to me over these few minutes. Do stop by our website, iProduceProject.eu, and follow us on social media to know more about our project. As I mentioned before, we welcome you to get in touch with us at any time. We'd really love to hear from you. Thank you, and take care, everyone.
Hello everyone, my name is Thomas, and I'd like to show you some projects and activities we've done or we are doing in FabLab Brno for the last year to support our vision. You can also check it by yourself at the webpage world.fablabbrno.cz. So the vision of our team is that everyone has an opportunity to meet and master digital craftsmanship, and we are doing it by these projects. First of all, FabLab Brno itself, it's a place open 24/7 since 2017. This is how it looks here, and we had more than 1,000 people visiting and attending our workshops, more than 500 members that had at least 1 month membership. And since we have an electronic door opening, we can count the numbers of the door openers. And FabLab Brno is part of Innovation Center, so we are also focusing on the businesses and supporting businesses of our members. The second project is FabLab Experience. This is a FabLab on wheels, full-size trailer, and some numbers. Number of students that have attended the program is 11,212. Number of students that visited at least some afternoon workshops, it's more than 1,000, and teachers that filled the survey told us 70% of teachers told us that they were inspired by the FabLab experience. A small project, FabLab at Chiquita's house. This is like a mini FabLab or small FabLab corner maybe, like 3 printers, vinyl cutter, embroidery machine. We put it into the educational center of Chiquita's, which is called Chiquita's house. We are working on the international project to support entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs within the Fab Labs. So we'll have the results and outcomes by the end of the year. I will definitely share it. Maker Fair Brno, first Maker Fair in Brno, together with Make More initiative, a big event, 7,000 people. It's not bad for the first time, and more than 100 makers visited. We are working on a project which is called FabLab University. It's for both the students to get them in, to keep them involved after FabLab experience is leaving their school, with the competitions and other things, and also for the teachers that want to adapt the digital fabrication tools and machines into their educations. And the last thing we'd like to share is that we are applying for the conference, for the Fab conference in 2024, together with Make More. Feel free to check the webpage and sign yourself to the supporting wall. Thanks. See you guys. Bye bye.
Welcome to Studio 56, a community platform and part of the Ministry of Transport and Communications digital youth strategy. We nurture youth as digital learners by sharpening their 21st century learning skills as they develop in an all-pervasive digital environment. We have zones that are systematically divided to fit different age groups. The activities include creating electronics, gaming, and other interactive activities such as coding, virtual reality, IoT, and robotics. These engaging project-based workshops are centered around tackling various digital challenges. Here, youth can develop their problem-solving, critical thinking, creativity, and innovation skills. The goal of Studio 56 is to foster innovation, imagination, and creativity through the exploration of cutting-edge technologies in an inclusive and collaborative environment. With a focus on the fourth industrial revolution, we give the youth in Qatar a hand on encounters that facilitate them to refine their thoughts, be progressively engaged with critical thinking, problem solving, and collaboration, allowing them to become future creators of technology. Studio 56 has launched a Makers at Home campaign to respond to the current COVID-19 pandemic to support youth education at home. 6 online camps to respond to COVID-19, each offering digital fabrication workshops for youth, and 70 new online lesson plans were developed and included artificial intelligence, machine learning, virtual reality, and digital electronics. 1,865 online participants attended the workshops across Qatar, ranging from 7 to 18 years old. 146 online workshops to support youth education at home during the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition to that, Studio 56 contributed more than 22 published lessons in Scope DF. Our goal is to continue spreading knowledge among the youth despite the tough times we are going through. For more information on our work and how to get involved, please check out our website and social media channels.
Goodbye from Studio 56.
With the COVID-19 crisis, the world of makers and Fab Labs has been in turmoil during the past few months. Visors, masks, blouses, we have shown that distributed manufacturing was not a myth and that another way of thinking about the production of goods was possible. However, two of the most important aspects of the maker movement were also undermined during this health crisis: culture and social ties. Beyond using machines and prototyping, being a maker also means thinking about the world of tomorrow and creating a link between people and places. How can we keep the Maker FabLab state of mind despite the distance and transcribe it online? If we can do distributed manufacturing, can we also do distributed media and gather beyond the walls of a physical place? It is from this observation that the Maker Crew was born. Who are we? Makers from all over France, working in Fab Labs or not, who came together and prototyped solutions to try and make up for this lack. This is how 3 projects were born: the Minitel du Fer, the Apparamaker, and the Makers. The Minute Fair is a web application that collects and classifies nearly 500 resources. Documentation, video, articles, electronics, DIY, 3D, textiles. During the confinement, it was also a selection of 5 links per day shared on social networks, Facebook and Instagram. The Apéro Maker was a weekly meeting every Wednesday evening to talk, exchange, reflect on the maker movement, and above all, make a connection. The first part of the evening is a round table and the second part is a game. Broadcasted on Twitch, we went in just over a month from 20 viewers to almost 600. And finally, the Makerzine. The Makerzine, the first fanzine on the French-speaking duocracy movement, released a special edition on what it is to do during confinement. This French-speaking media from Canada to Africa via France was a real means of expression for the different contributors. Those are the projects that have allowed us for a time to come out of masks and visors to speak, talk and continue to spread the maker spirit beyond the simple act of manufacturing. We continue to do and innovate together. We have been makers. And those projects continue to grow and aim at sustainability over time. If we manage it into participatory medias, will we be able to turn it into distributed media? This is a challenge to come. So, will you join us?
Olá, meu nome é Felipe Laranja, sou líder técnico do FabLab da Casa Firjan. A Casa Firjan é um ambiente de inovação, educação, criatividade e tendências da Federação das Indústrias do Rio de Janeiro. Estou aqui para compartilhar com vocês o projeto FabStorming. Este projeto foi criado para ajudar empresas a visualizar como a fabricação digital pode transformar seus negócios. Observando o uso dessas tecnologias no mercado, elaboramos categorias de aplicação, que chamamos de oportunidades da fabricação digital, que é o conteúdo principal deste projeto. Esta ferramenta de ideação tem o objetivo de apresentar caminhos para aplicar o potencial da fabricação digital no desenvolvimento de novos produtos e serviços, gerando insights para futuros projetos. Queremos, com o FabStorming, tirar o foco sobre o uso das tecnologias e trazer um olhar sobre novas possibilidades de negócio, ajudando empresas a enxergar o valor da fabricação digital e transformar makers em empreendedores. A dinâmica de uso dessa ferramenta é bem simples. Temos um tabuleiro, nós sorteamos um desafio, esse desafio é debatido com as equipes participantes, cada um cria uma contextualização dentro da sua experiência, e então é proposto uma provocação usando as oportunidades da fabricação digital, para que todos gerem ideias de novas criações, novos produtos, otimização de processos, como atender novos públicos, usando estes recursos. Gostou da ferramenta? Quer usar com seu grupo? Basta acessar bit.ly/FabStorming e criar uma sala para usar com seu grupo. Entre em contato com a gente através do casafirjan.fablab@firjan.com.br e dê o seu feedback sobre o jogo. Para acessar mais conteúdos da Casa Firjan, entre na plataforma casafirjan.com.br. Boa ideação para você!
I would like to say a few words about Make a Woman project, which I took part in 2016. It was the first edition. So the main aim of the project was to prevent the social and technological exclusion of women through informal education in new technologies and craft. So as you can see on the image here, it included introduction to 3D modeling and 3D printing, woodwork, basics of electronics, laser cutting, working with CNC machine, designing simple websites, sewing, business advice, and product photography. So basically the target group were girls who were just starting their careers and those who were returning into the market after maternity or parental leave. So I was definitely in the first group. I was just graduating as an architect, and I was always really curious about technology. So taking part in this amazing program sounded like great experience to extend my interests. And that was the initial motivation for me to join. The idea was to actually prepare the product, like a little innovative product, which would allow us to train the skills we just gained during these theme blocks during Make a Woman program. So my project was this LED hula hoop. I'm passionate about modern circus. I'm a hula hoop lover, so it was something really close to my heart. It included little electronic elements linked with Arduino, which I coded, and linked with a LED stripe, which I put in hula hoop. And I had to, of course, model and test it in the softwares and 3D print certain elements. So it linked so many elements which we learned during the whole process. As you can see here, the process of building it and testing was really inspiring. And I think the thing which was the most important from the whole program was this realization that you can learn whatever you want if you put certain amount of focus and attention and your heart in it, and it's not so hard. I feel like I gained so much knowledge over this couple of months like I didn't for a previous 15 years of my education. So with this experience, with this motivation to learn more about tech side, I went further. I went for this training organized by Female in Tech called Geek Carrot Girls, and I went through course focusing on designing for technologies, and I shifted my career just after a couple of months. So basically my first experience was working in this innovation lab where I, apart from designing for technologies, I as well helped to furnish the office with the knowledge I gained during Make a Woman. So I really think this program changed my life and showed me you can really shift your career and decide about what you would like to do very easily. Thank you.
Hello world, hello FabLab network, and everyone else that is looking or is attending remotely to the FABxLive event. This is a very special edition. You know, we live in this paradoxical time in which a very small, tiny virus is producing probably the biggest changes in the world. Some of them probably needed, some of them not. But for sure, alongside with all the negative implications, there are other positive ones. This year, we are not meeting in the same place as we used to do every single year for the last 15 years. But we are making more accessible the content and the amazing knowledge that this network has been generating for close to 2 decades already. So you are in FABxLive, which is an event co-produced by the Fab Foundation and the Center for Bits and Atoms. And this is the 4th day of this event, following 2 previous days hosted by Neil Gershenfeld, Sherry Lassiter, and Blair Evans. This special day is about emerging futures. And if you attended the previous session, you will learn that this is not about flying cars or science fiction. This is about a more critical conversation about how we use technology to enable the futures we want. And in order to have the futures we want, we also need probably to shift certain narratives and start to build certain values while building those futures. So today, I'm really glad to have in this conversation 5 people actually, 5 people representing the work of the network, the work of technology beyond the labs, right? Beyond the spaces where you create things, because these amazing places where you learn how to make almost anything. I think there is also another dimension that is connected to what we do, which is how we change the world and how we make it the place again that we want to live, and how we enable the emerging futures we want. So having people that has been, choosing this group of people is basically related to very young ages, but yet a lot of work being done already. So this is people that has been able to create their own career path. They are hybrid profiles. You will learn about that. They have been having, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 lives already. And we want to learn from their work, but also I want also to learn from how they see the future that is coming, if it's coming or if we are making it coming. So I think that without further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker, and is Alejandra Diaz from Mexico, but at least born in Mexico. Hi, Ale. Let me do like a short introduction. She's doing a PhD in engineering science in the Tec on Monterrey. She founded the Laboratorio de Diseño Avanzado, which is a space for interdisciplinarity and experimentation in design in the Latin American context. And she's also one of the co-founders of the FabLab Kids that most of you or some of you know. So Ale, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Thomas. No, I'm very excited to be here. I'm very honored too. Let me share my screen to get started. And here I go. Okay, so yeah, my talk is called "Stop Chasing the Future," and I hope I can explain why by the end of these 10 minutes that I'm going to be talking. I want to do this as a personal journey throughout what I've been through in the last few years and where I am now and what I think it will be. So I want just to start talking about my background a little bit. I'm an architect and I practiced architecture, like traditional architecture, for some years after I graduated. And then I did a master in IAC, as many of you, all of you actually, all the speakers here. And then I also did the Fab Academy in 2014. And as Tomás said, I right now doing a PhD in engineering science at Tec de Monterrey that mixes reconfigurable robots using compliant mechanisms or soft robotics. I still don't know how I'm going to achieve this, but it's where I want to get. A couple of years ago, I founded with my husband the Laboratorio de Diseño Avanzado, where we do a lot of digital fabrication with traditional construction and parametric design. So we build things, we make things in different scales, mixing traditional techniques with digital tools. Now, like this small pavilion, we do interior design, and we also do some industrial design for traditional customers. One of the last projects that I did is this one. We got a fund from the National Fund of the Culture of the Arts in Mexico, and one of my interests is in biofabrication, actually. So we got this exhibition at a museum in Mexico City where we could show day-to-day objects that had been passed through some process integrating bio something, no? So sometimes it was bioengineering. We engineered E. coli, for example, to make it glow. But then we also used other types of materials to make bricks or clothes, and we put it there for people to get a closer idea of what biotechnology is and have a more critical idea of it, since it's a very polemic thing here in Mexico. And with these same people that I collaborated for synesthesia, I designed and fabricated these machines for synthetic biology that have the goal to be Latin American technology. So we wanted to develop something that was made here, cheap or accessible at least, and that way we also think that democratizing technology and science would be an easier path. So this is a question that I get very often when I show some of the work that I've shown you. People tell me like, so what is that you do? And at the beginning I got very, very scared of having this question because I didn't really have an answer, but now I feel pretty comfortable saying that I just do what I think it's fun, and I go and I do it. And how do I go from building traditional houses to experimenting with fluorescent E. coli? I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think there are three main reasons why I got this hybrid profile. The first thing is that I like self-learning. I find something that I think is interesting, and then I just go ahead and make it. And I have an example of this thing, and I remember this moment when this part of me was triggered, and it's thanks to this lady, Silvia Brandi. She was the coordinator in NIAC, and I don't think she knows this, but when I got in NIAC, I was very nervous because everybody was talking about and doing so much cool stuff, and they were coding, and they were using Arduino, things that I had never used. And I went up to her and I said, you know what? I was expecting for my teachers to teach me and tell me how to do these things, and they're not doing that, and I'm very frustrated. And she said, why do you want to be taught one thing in one class? If you are here, you have access to people, to tools, and you can do anything you want. And in that second, my mind like exploded, and I was like, she's absolutely right. I have everything I need here to do whatever I want. And that's why I think that spaces for creation are very important for triggering innovation. So spaces like IAC and the FabLab can actually promote this kind of behavior. I also a big collaborator. I love connecting people and build communities with them. For synesthesia, for example, I could say that I was running this project, but I actually was collaborating with these friends of mine that are biotechnologists, and then a lot of other people from very different backgrounds and states of Mexico. And not only from different parts and cultures, but also from different disciplines. I used to like this word a lot, anti-discipline. I consider myself somebody that likes just erasing all these lines between disciplines. But now that I think about it, I like the concept of hybrid profile better, because I think that more than ever now, we should be celebrating diversity, not also in fields of knowledge, but in cultures, in levels of knowledge, no? And embrace that and create with that. And this is what I've been doing for the last years. This is the space where I used to work in Tec de Monterrey. It's called the Innovation Gym. I was running the Maker Lab there. And a project that also puts together all these concepts is this one. We created agave fiber, a filament with agave fiber, just collaborating between different disciplines. And nobody really knew about 3D printing or anything, but just by working and collaborating, these ideas started to come up, and now we have this new product made with local things. Another project is a new FabLab in a slum in Monterrey, in this slum called La Campana. We did a participatory design with the people of the neighborhood. We got many collaborators, and it was funded by the British Council. But the cool part is that we all got together to give a meaning to the FabLab in the middle of the community. And then we did an activation. We rehabilitated, we did placemaking with this, for building this kind of dumpster into a park. And if you go there right now, this was a year ago, it's amazing what the community has done. They plant trees, they put more furniture, and they are making something from used to be nothing. The FabLab that we started there has many programs. One of them, of course, is FabLab Kids, where, as you know, many of you know, we celebrate culture through technology. These are the kids from our lab. They come every Saturday, and we've just, the community has been growing and growing. One of the cool projects in Fab Kids lately is the Global Kids Day. Last year, every year we celebrate a culture. Last year we celebrated Japan. Many kids from around the world built koinoboris with laser cutter, and we shared the experience online. But all of this that I've been telling you is before COVID, no? So what's happening now? Regarding FabLab Kids, we decided to do the Global Kids Day again, doing what we are all doing, just taking whatever we had and make it digital. And it was actually a pretty cool experience. We celebrated Africa this year. So the kids had to make masks and drones with whatever they had at home. And then we got 180 kids sharing their creations and singing songs together. But one of the main things, or the most interesting things that happened is this. We were almost getting to the end of the workshop, and we said, okay, now it's time to interact. And we would try to explain them how we were gonna sing together, and they just started doing this, right? They were just saying hi and saying hello and yelling different languages and just, you know, like just doing this in the screen. And we understood that the kids were eager to interact. And it's something that these platforms that we're using now are not really giving to them. Okay, so this was very eye-opening to me. I was like, okay, so we're trying to collaborate, we're trying to communicate, but these platforms are not really doing that. And that's when I also decided to do an experiment on between the virtual world, the virtual world, like how the hyper virtual reality works versus a very analog one. In my class, I teach digital fabrication. How do you teach digital fabrication without machines and without access to the labs? Well, I decided to take my two groups, my two courses, and do one in a hyper virtual reality. We took the class to Minecraft and we did everything there. And then another one that wouldn't use any type of technology, but everything with hands. The experiences were very different. They both had to build a Rube Goldberg machine. There are these machines that make things in sequence. And the students felt like they learned better about making things with their hands, but they felt more comfortable working in Minecraft. They also felt like they collaborated with their mates in Minecraft and not when they were working real hands. So this gave me a lot of insights of how things, what is happening right now. And I want to take this example of this hyper virtual connected world. No? Just as Minecraft, Nintendo launches Animal Crossing when COVID started, and they were like, a lot of things happening that will happen in the real world. PETA started protesting treatment for digital animals. Givenchy launched their brand, their new catalog in Animal Crossing, and then the police was solving things through Animal Crossing. No? So what's going on? We are building worlds inside worlds, And this, I don't know if this is the path, but it's a little bit maybe scary for me, especially because I live in Latin America, and this has been very reflecting times. The digital gap is expanding, and this is something that really, really worries me. I see numbers like these that are very optimistic, like how many people in internet in Mexico, for example, has access to internet. Maybe 66% of population older than 60 years old has phones with internet, and that sounds very good, right? That sounds like a very good number. But then if you keep digging, you see that all that information that is in English, and only 5% of those people speaks English, right? So if we take this to the educational path, you say, like, you do the math, right? And you're like, is this really the way? Like, having access to internet is everything? And I think the answer is no. And I think it's the same thing that is happening in FabLabs. And that's when I realized that what I've been doing in the last years is chasing the future. I've been looking at what's happening in Europe, in the States, and I've been trying to real hard to stay updated. Okay, you talk about machine learning, and I go there. You talk about robotics for fabrication, and I go there. But is it really apply to what I live right now? And this is an example of what is going on in my mind. Tomas Vivanco recently invited me to do a workshop for the Digital Futures World, this event for architectural and digital and digital making. And I proposed this workshop where you take data from databases and you visualize it or manipulate it with physical interfaces. I'm very interested in this relationship between the physical and digital. And when I see what others have proposed, I freak out. Like, I enter and I see what people are proposing. They're talking about artificial intelligence, VR, biodesign, neurodesign, and I'm like, wait a second, I am not updated, right? Like, I'm dragging behind a little bit what's happening. And this was also something that I realized, because when I'm teaching the course, I realized that it doesn't really matter, because the background of the people that I was working with were actually interested in the process of learning, and even though they had previous knowledge, they were just building on top of that.
Ale,
and yeah.
Ale, sorry to interrupt. You are over a couple of minutes, so.
Oh, sorry.
Don't worry.
So yeah, no, I'm just gonna wrap up and say that I
think. But the previous slide looks very interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So what's happening in LATAM? We import everything. We import knowledge. We import the future itself. And what do we export? We export talent and ideas. Our systems cannot retain it. So I feel like the future is local. Like, we need to put all of efforts and all our attention in connect more dots and talk to people outside the FabLab network, and to build an agenda that runs in parallel with that actual educational systems. We need to create our own future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ale. And I don't know if you have the opportunity to look at the previous session of Emerging Futures with Ron Eglash and Felencia Jutabarat, but it's so nicely flowing from, they were mentioning Ron from the cultural situated technologies and cultural situated interventions, and Felencia explaining about the through a very practical example, what is happening in Indonesia in relationship to the COVID response. And now seeing these examples and taking it to Latin America is fantastic. And to continue the flow, I think that it's great to go towards the south, to the very south. Let's see how far in the south Thomas can be, because he can be all the way down to the Antarctica, right? And so Thomas Vivanco, who is a really good friend and someone that I admire a lot, and all the work that he has been doing, not only as an architect, but also as an activist. He is now a PhD candidate in architecture and urban planning. He's part of the Digital Futures Group at the Tongji University in Shanghai. So, Thomas, we're ready to learn about the South.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tomas, for the invitation to this panel. Also, it's great to be back after a while, back to the FabLab network after a while. So yeah, the idea of my presentation is to, let's say, understand the global context, no? What is happening in the world, to read the context and make the present in order to design the future. I don't know if you can see my screen, my full screen, but yeah, I would like to start with this image. The people who were in Fab 13 a couple of years ago might see the difference between Santiago and this image. This is not snow, it's sand. And this is a huge problem that we're having. Sand, or desertification, is going super fast. It's moving 2 meters per day to Santiago. So it's a matter of time that we will have the Andes Mountains like this. Yeah. So this might happen. This is a future that might come if we don't act, if we don't do something. So because we regularly, when we design within the 3 dimensions, but we almost never design or consider the 4th dimension applying to the physical world. This means, how do we design the present for the time? So I will divide my presentations in 4 main topics. And the first one is to understand the urban impact over landscapes. The first that I have to say is that rural areas almost doesn't exist in the world. All the rural areas are services that contribute, or are infrastructure that contribute to the functioning of the system of the cities. Like in Chile, we have the north with the extraction of mining of copper. In the middle of the country, we have the wine growing. And in the south, we have the aquaculture, where we export salmon, where is the salmon industry. So all these rural areas are serving not only the big Chilean cities, but also they're serving the rest of the world. But if we go wider, we will understand that the hydropower world plants and global copper extraction, these serves, let's say, this global city logic that Saskia Sassen always said. But when you cross that extraction, that mining in the world, and you cross it with the infrastructure, with the digital infrastructure that we have, that is the global fiber optics network that the World Bank published 2 years ago, and we will see immediately that the fiber optics is completely related with the global population. So big cities are the cities who consume more global resources, but also are the cities or are the places where they are more digital connected. So the world is colonized by the urban system. So my question is, we should continue thinking about the urban, or we can make that difference in between what urban is and what rural is. My second idea that I want to present is the idea of abundance. No? This is a typical image of a Black Friday that could be anywhere in the world. It could be in Santiago, could be in New York, in London, everywhere. But and maybe for many people, they think that nothing is wrong, and probably nothing is wrong. But when we analyze the global, the Earth overshot day, we will see that in the past 30 years, or 50 years, sorry, we have been increasing the overshot day. This means that by the 1st of August, until last year, we already consume all the biosphere reserve for the rest of the year. So we are going by credits. So until now, we need 1.75 world to maintain our lifestyle. But let's analyze a very tiny, weak signal. And let's analyze the coffee cup. It's normal, no? Sometimes you go, when you're living in your city, you can go down, you buy a cup of coffee, of cardboard coffee, and you drink it, you throw it away, and then you take another one. Normally, we can drink many of these coffees. But let's analyze the price of that coffee cup. When you buy it in Alibaba, I took it, this screenshot is from yesterday, you can buy one cardboard coffee cup for 5 cents. But when you analyze the environmental impact of that coffee cup, means that one coffee cup contaminates or uses 10 centimeters of landscape. This means that if only Starbucks coffee cups that they have the 3% of the global production means that we have 76 million cups. But when you go to the pricing, if a cup contaminates 1 or 10 centimeters, then 100 meters cost $60 because of the price of the cup. Where you can buy a piece of land with $60? Almost nowhere. So who pays the bills? Who pays the difference? Because we as users, we don't pay the bills, we don't pay the difference, let's say, of the contamination, of the global impact. And this guy pays the bills. It's not the economy, it's not the people, it's the planet. But something happened, yeah? So as I was saying before, the August 21st, we have the 99 global shot day, but something happened. A couple of months ago, this was a global panorama in almost all the cities, New York, Paris, and what happened? The pandemic, no? And this pandemic generates a positive impact in the environment. So for the first time in 50 years, the overshot day was reduced. And was reduced quite a lot, almost 20 days. So thanks to pandemic, let's say, we are now decreasing the amount of Earth that we need to use to maintain our normality. So we really want to go back to normality, but the idea of abundance, that we can go, consume, take coffee cup and throw it away, of all these weak signals, if we don't read them, then we will still living in an illusion. So we shouldn't go back to that normality. The third idea, this design as a process, not as a result. In high school, I wanted to be an architect. I always wanted to become an architect. Yeah. So I remember that almost in the last year of high school, I need to choose like the specific, let's say, courses to develop my professional career. So I took computation, natural science, and arts. That could be like very normal, no? Someone who wants to study architecture nowadays. But that happened 20 years ago. But the system, the Chilean system, or my school system, instead of thinking that I was right, that like they will, instead of pushing me forward or supporting me in my decision, they sent me to the psychologist. They said, this guy is crazy. Why this guy want to study architecture if he's choosing computation, natural science, and arts? There's no relation at all. But 10 years after that, I moved to Ajax. And I was thinking about transforming architecture as an environmental metabolic system where environment can interact with people and the building can adapt. So the relationship between natural science, computation, and architecture make, let's say, a point when I was studying 10 years later. But nothing changed me so much until the next year when I was working at FabLab Barcelona. I was assisting Thomas Aneretti in the studio class, and I had to solder my very first PC board. And that PC board was the do-it-yourself urban sensor kit. This urban sensor kit was the, let's say, the 0 stage of the smart citizen environmental kit. No? When I was confronting to this, I didn't know the difference between a transistor or a capacitor. But I went super deep into understand that in order to design our future of our urban, let's say, or landscape, I need to have control over these critical technologies. Of course, that from all the PCB boards that I soldered, only one worked. So an engineer had to come and make everything run, but it was very transformative to me. So I understood that designing an architecture was much more like this image. Like, if you want to make fire, you can't make you must design, let's say, the chemical reaction, how to create fire. So I understood that design is a metastable dissipative process between two different states. To understand that, I will show you 3 images that I did in the Fab in Boston, in Fab 10 or Fab 11 in Boston, what I was pitching for Fab 13. The first image that I showed was this, no? Santiago with super nice or super beautiful, outstanding like economical numbers. My second image was this, people in the streets manifesting because they don't have, because of some incomes. And then I was showing these other numbers. This is why we propose to do the Fab 13 as fabricating society. So we invite all the FabLab community to think about the future of our society, but also to make the future of society, or fabricate the future of society within the FabLabs. Last year, since October of last year, we have this huge Chilean manifestation. 2 million people were on the street. So nothing changed too much. What all the people were asking for is for changes. So Fab 13, I think, was a very, like, let's say, advanced view of what the Chilean society was making. So the relationship between Fab 13 and what was really happening was very close. And we did that 4 years before. So systemic thinking plus critical technology plus speculative design can build this idea of new materialities. And when I said when I work with new materialities, I mean like in between the scale where you don't go to engineer, but you do go excessive into like a massive scale. So I design in the mesoscale. And the idea of mesoscale, this is a project that we developed in the London Design Biennale with Andres, when I was co-running with him FabLab Santiago, and we worked in a cybernetica project developed in Chile in 1971, and this was the very first physical cybernetics project in the world. That is someone, imagine that if someone is developing a teletransportation machine nowadays, it's kind of the similar. Stafford Beer was behind this project. Also taking in consideration the certification of the planet, we developed a mobile sand 3D printing machine 4 years ago, but also we were using or creating like environmental digital fabrication machines where we embed design and digital tools, and designing machines with only trash or technological trash, and connecting those trash in between energy. So we find the energetic relationship in between all the components in order to redesign new material expressions. But also, we were speculating also in this, I do with my students in my studio class, when we were speculating about what if we don't have any other piece of land? What if no one will have other piece of land rather than their bodies? What if we build a symbiotic relationship between body and plants? And we speculate that in order to live in a contaminated or in a future pandemic, the only secure thing that we will have will be our bodies. This happened 3 years ago. There's not too much difference of what is happening now, no? But also, what if we augment our feelings? What if we connect the digital feelings that we have in social networks and we connect them with a wearable to our physical, and that can give us some physical stimulus. Not too different when we are living without physical contact with the rest of the people. Also, I work a lot with biomaterials, with biofabrication, maybe a similar path as Ale. We have a lot of things in common. Also, we develop digital fabrication, biodigital fabrication techniques. Also, we do a research project in order to do high performance biomaterials, combining digital fabrication metamaterial systems and biomaterials developed in labs. Also using biomaterials to create bioactuators. In this case, was a project that we did with my research group with University of Stuttgart, where we use very small bioactuators, changed bioactuators, but we programmed them in order to make big changes. This was a 3 by 3 meters scale structure. But also we go deeper. Yes.
Sorry, we need like
perfect.
Like 1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute. Okay, new materials. Also, the work with the AA, and then just to close up, in January of last year, we went south, really south. And we went south thanks to the FAB Foundation, to the CVA, Catholic University, and of course, the South Systems and SolidWorks. We moved to the southernmost city of the world, and we opened up the FabLab Austral. This is the really south. There's nothing southern than here. This is subantarctic region. And here we are combining digital infrastructure, ecosystem, communities in an open design process, engaging the community so they can develop their own projects. And just to go very briefly, this is the best image that I have of a product developed on the FabLab, because with this image, I am learning, or through this project, I am learning to learn what I know in order to work with the community. So for me, building the future is decolonize design and decolonize digital fabrication of what we expect in order to transform from design digital technologies, natural resources, science, culture, to develop sustainable communities. That's it, Thomas. I'm sorry about. Thank you very much. Thomas, you're muted, I think, no?
You're absolutely right. I was saying, like, my apologies for having to, remind you that we need to wrap up. But also, I want to enable the time to have a conversation afterwards. So after Tomas, I am really also lucky to introduce another architect. I think we can agree now that it's very absurd to say architects, because what we have learned from Alex's presentation and now from Thomas is like this hybridization of profiles basically make obsolete to put tags on people. So it's very hard to say that any one of you is an architect. But let's say that Robert was trained as an architect in Costa Rica. He's specialized in advanced architecture and digital fabrication and social innovation. He served as director at the FabLab Veritas. He started also the FabLab Costa Rica Association, and he managed the Colby Mobile FabLab. I don't know if I mentioned that properly. So Robert, the stage is yours. Thank you very much, and let us know where are you? Where are you now?
Thank you, Tom, and thank you. And it's very happy and very excited to be here. I'm in Doha right now. So this is good, Alex. We're exporting local talent. So something interesting about this, and it's about what you have said about the title I have as an architect. So I don't consider myself just an architect. So this is a little bit about what I'm talking about. Let me just share this. There you go. So, well, I'm going to talk about futures. I don't know how it's going to be the future, but I hope it could be resilient, right? Because of the things that are happening right now. So just to introduce myself, this is a little bit about my path. So I started in 2007 with my own studio of architecture. And I was working as a professor of Veritas University in the architectural and products design school. Then I moved to Barcelona. I did my master. I was working also with FabLab Barcelona for almost 2 years and doing the Fab Academy at the same time, which was actually a huge challenge. It was amazing, to be honest. Then I moved back to Costa Rica and I started the foundation, the FabLab Costa Rica Association, actually. And I was working as the director of FabLab Veritas. And I got the certification of innovation management also in Costa Rica. And I had the opportunity almost 3 years ago to move to Doha. First as the manager of Cubic FabLab, but right now I'm working as an operations manager of Epticar Digital Solution, which is a company that actually provides different services for the educational and innovation system, especially related to STEAM and digital fabrication. So this is a little bit about this hybrid profile we're talking about. I have experience in architecture. I love actually design and digital fabrication. And that expertise gave me the opportunity that right now I'm mainly working on how to manage and operate spaces in Doha. We're running almost 4 Fab Labs and innovation spaces here in Doha. And we're also very close, and I love to be very close of education and academia. And you will see that we're creating a lot of content for that. And 2 of my passions are the arts. I love painting. I'm doing a lot of that. Actually, now I have a lot of time because of COVID. And I love photography as well, right? So just to talk about my experience, I really like to show these images because it shows actually the 2 realities. And for me, context is everything in order to develop yourself. So I had the opportunity to work very close in some slum areas in Costa Rica, working with the community. And we opened I think the first Fab Lab inside one slum area in Latin America. And then I have the other experience working in Doha, right, where the reality is totally different, when the access to maybe the machines and the access to technology is not that difficult. But to be very honest, the challenges are kind of the same. So we're talking about, we're facing the same challenges. No matters if you have or not the resources, economical resources, there's a huge gap in the world about what is happening, different challenges that we're facing every day. And I think this is very important. And I think that as a statement, we are more than just professionals, and we're more than just the job we have. We're citizens living right now, having and struggling with a lot of things. But I want to see the positive things, or the positive side of things right now, and especially because of the situation we're living right now. And even if we have all these massive problems right now, there's a huge opportunity for all of us to see how to fix it, to find the solutions actually to accomplish those challenges. And why? Because those challenges are the same I was showing before, are the same challenges that we have in different levels, different regions. But something that I learned a lot actually working here in Doha is about how to be responsible and very, very close to the culture, to the different values that we have. Because as a FabLabs, we share a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that those things are going to be applied in different contexts. If we don't have that relationship, it actually is not going to work. So moving forward, I think this is a very interesting fact. For example, in the 1900s, 2/3 of the population work in agriculture and manufacturing. So, but currently right now, just 1 of 10 are doing that. So does that mean that 50% of the population is unemployed? Well, absolutely not. The thing is that we're creating hundreds of thousands of new jobs, right? So, and history can teach us a very important lesson, which means that in the last few decades, we create 30 million new jobs, right? And these jobs were not created by big enterprises. No, we're talking about they were created by high growth new ventures. And this is how things are happening right now, and how we can see forward after, for example, what happened with COVID. But the real question we need to ask us is, where will these new jobs come from? Okay, where are the targets? Where are the niche? Where are actually the different fields where actually we can come? And actually, there's an interesting fact that says, like, in the future, 3.5 million people that drive cars and trucks may lose their jobs, right? But however, that doesn't mean that they're gonna lose their jobs and they cannot do anything. So what is gonna happen is that new industries and new concepts that are not existed in the market yet are gonna rise actually to solve that problem. So that means that we need to think with a different mindset about my actions and the things that I'm doing right now. I'm not gonna talk about things I'm doing right now in Doha. I'm gonna talk more about how we're thinking to do the things here. And the first thing I did when I came to Doha was to understand the local and international landscape. And it was very interesting for me to understand how Epticar as a company was growing, and it was having an action, and it was connecting to the ecosystem. So just for you to know, for example, Epticar is working, it started in 2012 as a reseller of technology. But during the coming years, we realized that, okay, it's not just about bringing technology to people, it's about how we can create the right strategies for the people to understand that technology is just a tool, but a very efficient tool to solve challenges. So at that point, Epticar created the concept of SANA, which means a maker in Arabic, and we start developing different activities. For example, national competitions, the first mobile FabLab in Doha, the different seasonal camps with the ministry, private and also public sectors. But in 2016-18, there was another arm about consultancy. Based on the know-how and the knowledge that we have, the skills and the team, we realized that now we can actually open the consultancy services. And in 2018 till 19, so we start working with a lot of maker spaces, creating and developing and operating those spaces. And last year, actually, we had the opportunity to say, okay, instead of just giving services, let's try to start creating products. But those products should be actually related with the demands and the needs and the feedback from different stakeholders. Just to summarize very, very, very brief, these are the kind of services we're doing right now. But the interesting part is when we analyze how we were doing, how was the old normal before COVID, most of the things that we were developing were programs for a public and private sector and running spaces for different stakeholders. But COVID came and actually hit us a lot, very, very strong. And if we make an analysis of this, we see all of us together in as a company in a boat. We're a boat with a lot of goods, knowledge, ideas, skills. But then actually we have this crisis. And this crisis is actually a time to be resilient and how to activate different strategies to move forward. The first thing we did actually is to understand who are the winners and the losers in the industry because of COVID. And actually, we are in the losing part, right? We were losing a lot because we're working on education and manufacturing. But when we analyze actually how there are some sectors who are actually gaining a lot, we realize if we link the current situation, the current mood or way we're doing things with the markets that actually are growing, we can actually execute and create different and very interesting things. The first thing that we did, it was to adjust the services. We provide actually hands-on activities, workshops, but we figure out, okay, how we can continue deploying and giving the kids the hands-on activity, bringing the kids to different places, of course, with the securities and protocols because of COVID, and shifting the way that we were actually, how we were teaching technology. But something interesting, and I think this is one of the most important things for me at this point is, okay, based on the needs of the market and based on the situation that we were having as a company, we, instead of just waiting for the COVID to be over, we defined to actually work on 3 different projects. One of them is actually the SONA Master Program. Is going to be an after-school program, online and physical, that actually is tackling the 4 Industrial Revolution skills development. This is actually right now developing, and we're going to start testing the first MVPs. Something very interesting is that we developed Judur. Judur is an online and physical curriculum to learn Arabic in a more an engagement way. This is interesting because the way most of the international companies are teaching Arabic is like how they teach English. So it doesn't make sense. It doesn't actually apply for the roots of Arabic, sorry. And then we launched last month Siaga, which is a design and a digital fabrication platform that links designers with manufacturers to create products needed by the market and produce them together. So what I'm trying to show you guys is actually mainly all the strategies behind a process, all the strategies behind to take the actions needed and to be resilient to those actually critical moments. And I remember that in the email we got from Thomas for this amazing invitation, he was asking how we envision the world in the future, right? So I don't know how it's going to be, but I really wanna, at least if I going to be in the future, I wanna look back and to see that at least we achieve some of the challenges that right now we're having. And those challenges were through the actions and the different paths that we did in actually our daily efforts in life. So yeah, this is just a little bit about me, and thank you guys.
Thank you very much, Robert. A super interesting perspective. You know, coming from a Latin American reality, going to one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And still facing challenges that as it was said before, they're quite shared, probably in different contexts. No, I want to jump now to we have been talking about meaning and context, I think, in some way. Also talking about hybridization in relationship to profiles. But I wanted to introduce the next speakers, which are Carmen Aguilar and Eche Tancal from FABlabs. To tell us probably about narratives and maybe more radical interdisciplinarity, I would say. So just a little introduction. FABlabs is a London-based design studio using technology to explore absurdities that emerge at the intersection of technology, art, science, and the future. We use design to challenge conventions and stimulate conversations, placing planetary needs and collective experiences at the center of our current evolving narratives. So, Carmen, Eche, stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Tomas, for having us here with this incredible people and amazing work. I'm going to start sharing my screen.